The goods and the services tax is a mega reform, but there's plenty of politics that has gone into it. This is a reform that markets have looked forward to, and it's a reform that is going to disrupt the Indian economy. And who better than a man who understands the language that the market speaks, also understands Indian economy, and of course will talk about on the politics of the GST. My guest on ET Now, Jayant Sinha, India's Minister of State for Civil Aviation. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. Congratulations on what is perhaps going to be history in the making. We at ET Now are calling it tryst with GST, much like tryst with destiny. While the Finance Minister has said that, GST is devoid of partisan politics, who really gets the credit for the GST?
The credit for the GST, of course, should go to the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Finance Minister. As you know, this has been a reform long in the making. It's taken many years. In fact, the idea was first mooted in Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government in 2003.
That's right.
And thereafter, there was a long saga of trying to make it happen. And of course, it stalled completely during the UPA time because no framework was able to be created that would bring on board the centre and the states. It was when our government came to power in May 2014 under the leadership of the Honourable Prime Minister. Of course, you remember he had asked Dr. Manmohan Singh ji and Srimati Sonia Gandhi ji to his home and spoken to them about the GST. Then, of course, the Honourable Finance Minister worked masterfully with the GST Council, with the empowered group of finance ministers, and through a great deal of consensus building and legislative hard work, it became possible to actually get through a packed legislative process, which included the constitutional amendment, it included bills being passed in all the assemblies, and then the notification of the rules, which we are still going through with the GST Council. So if you actually look at the lawmaking that's gone into it, the extraordinary transformation of India's fiscal architecture that's happened, it's astonishing that we've been able to accomplish all of this in 3 years after literally 10 or 11 years of inactivity on this.
So while it was devoid of partisan politics, the BJP will still take the credit for it, even though the successive governments previously have worked on this. I understand that, and I understand why you would want to take credit. But let me be the devil's advocate. And
the people of India should take credit.
Okay, the people of India should take credit. That's a fair point indeed. But to be the devil's advocate, a lot of people out there believe that this GST, and you and I both know, is not the most utopian, not the ideal GST that was thought about when it was first mooted, when the idea was first mooted. Will you concede that as a part of consensus making, too much compromise has been done by the centre, especially because to get states on board, they were going to give up their fiscal powers. A way too much compromise has been reached, and will this also compromise the impact that the GST was supposed to have?
Democracy is the art of the possible, and this is the art of the possible that we have achieved. As Dr. Adya himself has said, as the Honourable Finance Minister has said, as the Chief Economic Advisor has said, yes, we've had to make certain compromises, but that's what was necessary for it to be a consensus legislation, a consensus reform process. Of course, as people get comfortable with it, as they begin to realize that some of their fears are unfounded, what will happen is that we will further streamline, we will further keep on improving it, because it's a dynamic process. And the step that we have taken is an extraordinary step. The fact that we've pooled the fiscal powers of the centre and the states together into the GST Council, the fact that we have taken something like 50% of the taxes that touch every single Indian today, and we brought them within the GST framework. I mean, this is enormous in terms of what we've accomplished. But even more importantly, we have also established a dynamic process, a process through the GST Council, the consensus building way in which the Honourable Finance Minister has done it, that really gives us great confidence in the ability to keep improving it.
I will talk to you about the politics and the scope for improvement and how easy or difficult will that be in just a minute from now. But, I'm going to voice an opinion and a concern that keeps coming on the GST. Given the consensus building, given the compromise that was required, in its current form, a lot of people say that GST is at best an improvement over the present messy tax structure. How are you going to refute that? Because it was supposed to be a clean one India, one tax. It's not clean, and it's very complex.
I don't agree with that. In fact, I call GST not goods and services tax, but a grand simplification of taxes. a grand
You go back to a new
simplification
acronym
exercise.
for the GST.
Well, you have to come
Yes.
up with some buzzword. But it is a grand simplification because what has happened is rather than 17 different taxes, 8 at the central level, 9 at the state level, forms that are different and are not inconsistent, a paper-based process, tremendous amount of confusion in the economy, all that has been swept aside. Now we have one tax and one process for filing this tax, and that is a tremendous simplification. The other thing you must understand, this is hugely important, and you know all your viewers should fully understand this, is that it is utopian to argue that we would immediately collapse this into just a few rates, 2 or 3 rates. A lot of people have argued for that, or even 1 rate, because right now the rates that are applying to a whole host of goods and services are very different. And if we have to maintain non-inflationary and price stability type conditions, we cannot overnight take all of the aspects of the economy and go from a wide variety of rates and collapse it into 1 or 2 rates. That's just not a practical idea. So it is much better to adopt the principle that's been adopted this time, which is to apply a fitment in such a way that largely price levels are not impacted, or if they are impacted, they're impacted by design. So that way we get to a situation where we maintain price stability, and like I said, what's very important is that we've established the working procedures, the protocols by which we can dynamically keep improving.
I will talk to you about the scope of improvement, but you know, when you do that, when you say we want to keep it non-inflationary, we want to keep prices as close to as they were, we want to be pro-poor, we don't want to touch upon, because indirect taxes in their own sense are regressive.
And that's a very important point.
Agree with me?
That's a very important point.
Yes.
In this whole tax discussion, Supriya, you have to understand 3 numbers. The first number you have to understand is 1 crore. 1 crore is the potential pool of people that will have to be filing as part of GST.
Yes.
Then we have about 4 crore direct taxpayers. But then we have 125 crore people who are all impacted by GST. They're not necessarily impacted by direct taxes. But because we're talking about indirect taxes, we are impacting 125 crore people. Every single Indian is impacted by this.
You know why I'm sympathetic to the political cause of the GST, and I agree, as a politician you can't take a tax and just go hammer and tongs on making it simple. I know politically it's not palatable, but how will you refute economists? What would you say in defense when people say that political optics or political concerns have outweighed the economic logic of what the GST was supposed to be?
Well, first of all, as you know, economists don't vote, people do.
Okay.
So we are here to serve the people, not to serve the economists. And like I said, democracy is the art of the possible. We've already taken a grand and gigantic step forward of simplification of taxes, right? So we've taken a massive step forward. Let's not overreach. Let's not take a leap too far. What we've done is really, I think, the right set of compromises or the right set of decisions. Not at all small steps. Please understand, Supriya, and again, viewers have to really take a step back and really recognize what has happened. This kind of tax reform has never been attempted in the history of humanity before. A country the size of India takes the taxing powers of the center and the states, pools it together, goes to one tax instead of 17 different taxes, establishes digitization of all business processes. It's never been done before.
It's quite pathbreaking.
Never been done before. So let's recognize it for what it's worth, and let's not make perfection the enemy of the good. We've done a good thing, we've done a terrific thing, and we have in place a process that will keep improving it. And that's how stable, well-run societies work.
I'm going to ask you a direct question on growth, because I know you understand macroeconomy and numbers. The whole argument for a GST was that it is going to add about 1.5 to 2 percentage point in India's GDP economic growth. The recent projections now say at best it will add about 0.4% in the short term, maybe in the long term more. I know you understand numbers. Given the present GST scenario, and I agree, you have to make it politically palatable. You've got to think about the poor people. You've got to think about India at large. How do you think this is going to impact economic growth? And I want you to talk numbers.
There are various estimates that economists have put out. Frankly, I don't hold much stock in numbers that are put out by economists, because I know, having been somebody who's built a lot of models, has spent a lot of my life building models. I have a degree in operations research.
That's right, yes.
So I know how models are built, and models have rarely been very accurate, particularly when it comes to macro forecasting. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the global financial crisis.
Right, yes.
So I'm not sure we need to get too carried away by the models. What we do know is that as we ease the compliance burden, as we enable supply chains to get streamlined, as we enable higher tax collection, it will boost economic activity. Now, when and how that's going to happen, what the lags are going to be, which sectors of the economy are going to be impacted to what degree, what the formalization of the economy is likely to happen, these are very large conceptual questions that go to the underlying structure of the economy itself. You know, large econometric models and so on do not have an ability to pick up this kind of a structural change in the economy and be able to accurately forecast a turning point of this kind.
Right.
So I wouldn't get too worried about whether it's 0.4%, 1%, 2%. I don't think any of that really is a matter we should consider. What we should recognize is that we've taken a gigantic step forward.
So you still will not put a number on the growth?
I think it is not a sensible, practical, realistic thing to do, to put a number. It makes for a good headline, but in policy making, or even if you're investing, you don't go by numbers that people throw around, because you have to look at the underlying science and the underlying logic that drives those models. We are at a big structural turning point in the economy.
Right.
Anybody who says they can take an econometric model, or whatever kind of model, IO model that they're running, and they can come up with a forecast, I'd be very cautious about it.
No, I think a lot of people out there believe that this is also going to boost investment, and I'll talk about that next. But I quickly want to touch upon markets. And there was a lot of euphoria as far as the GST is concerned. Now there is very cautious optimism. A lot of people believe demonetization was a disruptive exercise. GST in some sense is a known devil, but demonetization also did impact it. I'm going to ask you, it is going to be disruptive. There will be pain in the short term. What should markets brace up for? How long do you believe pain to last? At least the pain to begin with. Because you and I both know there will be disruptive pain.
Well, again, as we've discussed many times, Supriya, the reality is, are you taking trading positions or investment positions? If you're taking trading positions, you're absolutely right. There will be some disruptions. Certain sectors will be hit more than other sectors. Certain sectors will benefit. Those that will see more, buying and more economic activity in the organized areas, their revenues are likely to go up. So from a disruption trading perspective, yes, there'll be some blips here, and you may want to take positions here and there. I'm not sure people have done particularly well from a pure trading perspective in terms of their returns. From an investment perspective, again, the question you have to ask is this already priced in or not? The reality is it's probably already priced into the markets, because it's been known for a while that this is going to happen. There are some shifts as rates have come up, but by and large, I think it's priced in. I think, as always, you have to look to the underlying companies, their earnings growth, their cash flows, to really understand which positions you want to take in the markets. But by and large, net, I would say, as far as the markets are concerned, apart from a few disruptions that will enable some trading here and there, for the long term, this has largely already been absorbed.
But what about the earnings impact? Do you see the pain or the euphoria, if I may, last for a quarter or two as teething troubles wane off?
The earnings impact is going to be positive. There's no doubt about that. And it is positive because of at least three reasons. One, as I've already said, the formalization of the economy. Two, the supply chain reconceptualization, the reordering and the streamlining of the supply chain, which will take a lot of cost out. So that's a second thing. Third thing is that certain sectors will benefit more than other sectors. For example, my sense is that as far as the automotive sector is concerned, taxes have come down. So that will lift the automotive sector. We have a view that in aviation, yes, taxes have also come down somewhat. So that could lift aviation as well. So there are certain sectors where you will see earnings lift. Now, the degree to which it is priced in, I can't comment on that. But yes, I think the impact on earnings longer term is absolutely going to be positive.
One of the things that electoral politics, and I think politicians like yourselves who have to go back to the voter constantly worry about, is price stability, inflation. There is now some kind of, the finance ministry has conceded that at least in the first 1 year or 2 years, the government will have to watch out against inflation. How much input tax credit is passed on to the customer and to consumers, all of that will determine inflation. How worrying a concern is that?
It is definitely a concern. As you know, we have a lot of people who are very, very poor, who live on a very day-to-day basis. And so anytime there's any price change, we worry about it greatly, because it impacts their life in a very, very dramatic way. And of course, the global experience on implementing GST has been that there have been some transient inflationary effects. So we do worry about that greatly. Now, you have to see this in three parts, Supriya. There's one which is very transient, which may be a price spike where people are unduly taking advantage and saying, oh, taxes are applicable now, which weren't earlier. because of course in the past VAT could have been applicable, which the consumer did not see. Now they're seeing a GST on it, so they could take advantage of that, and that's why we have anti-profiteering,
yes,
to make sure that those transient things don't happen. Then the second part of this is the settling down process. There will be some adjustment. People will not be sure, do we apply tax to this, do we apply tax to that, how will the input tax credit actually work, can I pass that through to consumer? There'll be some competitive effects that will come into play. So there'll be some medium term, let's say 0 to 3 to 6 month type transient settling in types of adjustments as well. So we have to be prepared for that, and obviously we're very, very vigilant as far as that is concerned. Then the third aspect is what is the long-term non-inflationary productivity enhancing impact on this. And there I think whether it is economists, whether it is business people or investors, everybody believes that it will drive down overall compliance cost in the economy, improve efficiency in the economy, and will be non-inflationary.
So if I were to just talk short and medium term, does it squeeze the elbow room for monetary easing? Because the RBI in its commentary even last time around said that they will be watchful. They will watch how the GST pans out. Do you believe it kind of squeezes the elbow room for a monetary?
Obviously, I can't speak for the RBI or the MPC. I think the way people should think about it, the way at least I'm thinking about it, Supriya, is that there will be more uncertainty on price levels in the next 0 to 3 to 6 months.
That's right.
Because of both the spikes that are possible, which I think will be quickly fixed, as well as some of the settling and adjustment process. So I think there is uncertainty out there, and one has to just be extremely vigilant right now.
So besides, of course, stakeholders like politicians like yourselves and your government and opposition that is now on board as far as the GST is concerned, the other big stakeholder is industry. I mean, they have to roll it out, and they're the ones who have to comply with this. While perhaps the big guns of Indian industry are prepared, are you worried about the level of preparedness of the small, medium vendors, traders? Because that's where the unrest seems to be.
Yeah. No, we are very worried, and we are trying to simplify matters for them as much as possible. That's why I call it the grand simplification of taxes. But again, come back to that 1 crore pool of people that will be within the purview of GST. Now 20 lakh we have already knocked out. If you're below 20 lakh, you are not within the purview of GST. If you're between 20 to 75 lakhs, we've said go to the composition scheme, 1%, 2%, 5%, apply that, and you're done with it. You have to file only once a quarter. So we've really simplified it for them. Now there is a bit of a fallacy that I want to address. I think Dr. Adhya, the Honorable Finance Minister, have also addressed it, is that there is a significant compliance burden. If you're over 75 lakhs, you have to file a lot of returns, and I think it was the Economist that said, oh my God, you've got 37 returns you have to file in 20 different places, 700, so it's great to create a headline and to try and create a bit of a fear around that. But frankly, any one of us that deals with computers or deals with systems knows that's a trivial problem.
The sense that I get from people like you and by speaking to various colleagues in the government like yourselves is that the idea is, let's start with something and then let's keep improving it. How easy or difficult will it be to reduce these slabs? How easy or difficult will it be to further simplify what you're starting? It's taken, almost 10-15 years for us to get here in the first place.
I wouldn't say it's a start. I said it's a giant leap forward for us. So, I think we've fundamentally transformed the tax system, which touches the lives of every Indian. So it's a very, very big deal. So let's recognize it and celebrate it for what it's worth. Of course, it's an evolutionary and dynamic process. The important thing to recognize, and this truly is a unique federal institution that we've created, with the GST Council and the manner in which voting power has been set up in the GST Council, 3/4 vote and all of that. I think that creates a tremendous check and balance, and it enables everybody to come around the negotiating table and do what's right for India and for the Indian public. That's a very powerful, a very dynamic and a very unique process that we've also created. It's gotten off to a fantastic start, so I have tremendous hope for the future.
So while it's a gigantic leap, there is always caution that policy makers like yourselves adhere to. What can go wrong, and what are you prepared to handle?
We are obviously worried about people understanding how this will work. We are worried about people digitizing. Obviously, we are worried about confusion relative to rules. Certainly we are worried about GST, and it's been tested very extensively, but you never know. So yes, only the paranoid survive. So if you want to survive, you've got to be paranoid, and we are, I think, appropriately paranoid right now.
Mr. Sinha, with that paranoia comes a lot of bravado, and I think it's very good that you're rolling out the GST. It's a tax reform in the making for over a decade, whose time has finally come. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.